Today on the bottom line, I'm still getting used to saying that, guys. The bottom line podcast, I said for so many years, the influence and marketing blueprint. But so if you guys don't know, or you skipped the intro episode of Taylor and I, then you now know that the podcast is called The Bottom Line. You've seen that in our branding. But today, I'll get into today's episode. I am joined by Tom Brown, quote unquote, the Shopify D2C guy. Probably if you're involved on D2C Twitter, you're familiar with Tom Brown. He is launched and bootstrapped 3 brands to 7 figures. He is working with 2,000 plus merchants every single month and consulting with them. So he has a lot of insights into a lot of different things, a lot of brands. He's also, and we get into this towards the end of the episode, building a brand in public with a lot of different people. So documenting the whole unedited journey of launching a direct-to-consumer e-commerce brand from scratch. And so he's been documenting that on Twitter, LinkedIn, etc. Really, really fascinating episode that I jump in with Tom. And one of the biggest takeaways is what I would say is 1 inch wide, a mile deep in that scenario of figuring out exactly who the customer was and is and presenting everything just to that one individual. That is my biggest takeaway after talking with Tom. He is obsessed with the customer. He has a very honest perspective around, his own tendency to have shiny object syndrome, etc. But I think the biggest takeaway after my conversation with him was, man, the key to scaling is picking one customer. It's 1 inch wide and a mile deep. So he has a lot of learnings around obsessing over the customer journey. And we get into all that on today's episode. So without further ado, let's jump in. Tom Brown, how are you, man? Thanks for joining the show.
It's good to see you.
You said you've bootstrapped 3 brands to 7 figures in income. Well, you haven't just said it. Hopefully you've done it if you're saying that. But my question is, what was the common denominator in each of those success stories?
Man, that's actually a really good question. By and large, like customer obsession. I know that's really easy to say, but it is customer obsession. And I mean, we're going to come on to this a whole lot more, I'm sure, around like just costs and bloat. And I know you've got your theories on that. But that has been the biggest thing, is like actually just keeping the customer front and center, not getting distracted by too many shiny objects, which is so hard to do. So easy to say, so hard to do. Like, I've definitely lived that and made a ton of mistakes by getting distracted by shiny objects. In fact, I know you put out a tweet recently, like kind of asking the question of why do so many business owners keep focusing like growing other businesses or trying to? And I think it's so much of like this shiny object thing. It's funny, that question has actually sat in my head for about a month.
Really? Yeah. I mean, it's also such an interesting, let's just go down that rabbit hole for a little bit. I think people want to do the things that they're good at. And a lot of people are probably really good at starting things. Entrepreneurs, right? Like that is the ethos of, hey, these people are probably, or I guess each of us are more privy to have a little bit more courage to start things, but to build it to the next stage of stage 2, stage 3 is a different skill set. So you either need to hire for those weaknesses or you need to learn on the fly, which I'm sure you can elaborate on like that. But yeah, it's an interesting thought exercise, because I feel like personally myself, I've thought about starting several different businesses while trying to maintain kinship. And it's always tempting. But sometimes it's over glorified to be like I've started so many different businesses, which is certainly amazing in its own right. But it's also like there's something element of doing one thing for a really long time.
Yeah, there is. And again, I think when I actually look back at it, yes, whilst, quote unquote, like I've done it, would I do it in the same way now? I don't think so. Like, would I actually just double down and focus on maybe 1 or 2? Yes, probably. I think in hindsight, kind of like you were just saying, I figured I could take on more, that I would miraculously just like find hours. And it's funny, as I kind of went on, I kind of came into this very naive, I guess, and bootstrapping kind of led me down that path somewhat, in that I didn't know what I didn't know, which in some ways was good. It served me. Like, there were no rules. But then as I kind of got more into this, and it's funny, there was a book that got recommended to me maybe like 4 3-4 years ago. There was Who Not How by Dan Sullivan, which was just a massive unlock for me of like, I knew I was the bottleneck in every single one of these businesses. Yeah, it was me making final decisions on things. I had way too tight a control on it. And when I read that, I was like, I'm the problem here.
So you've also done it. I mean, you're saying, hey, I want to go back and would I just focus on one of the brands? But also each of those brands is probably an education in and of itself, whether it's a certain category or certain opportunity that you see white space in the market, or it's just you're finding, hey, I don't really like this category. And maybe you could tell the audience what were those three brands, or at least the three categories. You know, I think I saw one of them was like a protein, one of them is a lifestyle. I don't know. Like maybe elaborate on how those three were. All those three at the same time? Of course not. Probably not.
No, all staggered. I mean, you're right. The first like proper one. I mean, I kind of had businesses before this, but the first one I really count was Posted Protein, and I ran that for probably 7, 8, 9 years, something like that. That started life as a protein bar brand here in the UK. It was when the likes of Quest were really popping off in the US. I was buying just an ungodly number of Quest bars from California, shipping them halfway around the world, costing myself a fortune. And I just got sick of it. And I started making them myself, started taking them in the gym, like just selling them to people that were interested in it. That in itself just turned into a whole business, almost again by mistake. But yeah, I grew that up. At the time I was producing in my mom's kitchen, couldn't scale this thing past like 200-300 bars a day, like just physically couldn't make more than that by hand. Couldn't get manufacturers to work with us. We found one in Germany that basically wanted to do like a first order of 100,000 with a guarantee of 250,000 bars in the first year. Like there was just no way I could afford it. Ended up flying to LA, going to a factory there, I think it was called U-Bar, and met with a woman called Emily who was like, that's insane. Like we can start with 10,000. But the issue we had was then around like customs and freight. And again, at the time, I'm bootstrapping this whole thing. Like I go find the money to put down on bars, then pay for freight. And these things had like a 6-month shelf life on it. I was like, by the time these get to the UK, like this is finished. So I parked it, and Posted Protein basically became a retailer of, in the end, like 100 and something different brands from around the world, supplement brands. So as you ironically ended up working with Quest and selling just a ridiculous number of Quest bars throughout Europe. And then Brexit happened, and our costs went up dramatically overnight, like 30, 40, 50% on everything. And to be honest, like the biggest mistake I made was not putting prices up immediately. I kind of figured like things would smooth out, that we would find a way through, or we would kind of go and manufacture ourselves, and just couldn't stomach it. And again, like at the end, finally had to. And then COVID happened, and the business just exploded all over again, which was so weird. Like we expected the whole thing to shut down. But literally, like, I remember it got to, it's been like March, April, and it literally 4x like overnight. Like all the gyms shut down. We thought we were done because, biggest customer gym goes. It just went nuts.
And then, so what were the other two? What were the other two businesses?
The other two, I mean, the one that's really been my focus for the last 3 years, which is the one that you guys actually ended up working on, was the personal safety brand. And as much as I don't really put the name out there, EBA, let's go with that. Yeah. Like initially the plan was actually to make it very public. And we, like, again, with that one, I built the whole thing behind a paywall. Had like sort of 30, 40 people following along, literally day by day, everything I was doing to build this brand. And very early on, we started selling. We started getting really weird messages, comments, people showing up at the office, showing up at the warehouse, just because of the nature of what we were selling. So I must admit, I took my name off everything. And to this day, like we still don't. Like we literally, I remember this was probably like 18 months ago.
Yeah, I noticed that on your LinkedIn.
Yeah, it's very vague. It's intentionally very vague.
But the brand is still operating.
Brand's still operating. We're actually about to release a whole series of like 2 new different products, and expanding into Amazon again, at long last.
Can you describe the product, or are you comfortable describing the product?
Yeah. So it's a personal safety alarm.
It's funny because, to take a step back, speaking of your LinkedIn, I discovered something that after all these years of knowing you that I don't know. And that is that you're an aircraft engineer working with British Airways.
Dude, that feels like a different life.
That is a fun fact for the audience. I love the description. You said worked predominantly out of Terminal 5 at London Heathrow Airport, turning aircraft around for departure, diagnosing, and rapidly fixing technical issues as they presented themselves. That, my friend, is a great job description. I see a lot of parallels between this and entrepreneurship. I'm sure you do. I'm curious because I think you have to be able to diagnose and rapidly fix issues. Obviously, as a founder, as something that you're jumping into. So I'm curious, what say you on that? How did that help you when you're actually when you think back, having an engineer brain?
I've never actually made that much of a leap between the two. But you're right, that there has to be. It's fun. I mean, the whole time I was at BA, like again, I'd had little side gigs while I was a teenager, like flogging stuff in school. And then I got to BA. I was there for like 5 years. And I almost spent the entire time, like I would go into like first class lounges, go into the first class on board aircraft. I would be like picking up newspapers that, I just couldn't find here in the UK. So American newspapers, like Wired magazine was always in first class. I'd be taking that, reading that. And then I started bringing laptops in and like working on stuff in between. But you're right, like the connection between that and entrepreneurialism. Yeah, I mean, there's got to be a correlation.
Yeah, I mean, being able to assess issues and fix them, but also go after things. I think that's the non probably related item is like you're not just fixing problems, but you're presenting solutions and going after new ideas.
Normally for stuff that you couldn't predict, like you just didn't know what the hell was coming at you. You get on an aircraft, you just grab the log, and you'd just be getting told by the cabin crew or flight deck of like what had happened in flight, what they'd found at the other end, and it was just like on you to fix it within a couple of hours, if that.
Fun fact, man, I aircraft engineer. That was just wild to me. I was like, man, I have to include this as a question. There's a problem today with too much fake UGC saturation. Consumers are looking for authentic reviews and content, and this is a way that you can stand out in your crowded market with authentic influencer content. So Cody here with an ad read for Get Serrel. So there's an explosion of D2C brands across categories. You got to be able to stick out. We here at Kinship actually use Serrel for influencer discovery, but Serrel is not just a discovery tool, but a way that you can search for brand aligned influencers, but reach out directly. You can manage them all in place. You can track performance all within one platform. So brands like Avi, Legends, Tab Chocolate are using them to get hundreds of creators talking about them on socials, and you can too. And in addition to that, all of our clients here at Kinship that are doing seeding are using that platform as well. So you can start your free 7-day trial with Serrel to get authentic UGC. Go check them out. One of the things, I was going through your Twitter and you were talking about this thread that you threw out, essentially that my little one-person e-commerce side hustle in beginning of 2023 crossed 1.5 million in revenue, took 740 days, and operates at 30% net margin. Here are 8 steps of my nutty journey. Throughout this, and I'll take this, well, you can take this wherever you want, but throughout this is focusing on one customer persona, obsessing over getting reviews, obsessing over the customers, responding to every single comment. Elaborate on that. Talk to me about that. If you're comfortable sharing, what was that business? Is that one of the businesses that you've already mentioned? Is that something that's new? I would love to hear. Obviously 30% net margins, fantastic.
Yeah, I do a lot of consulting, a lot of advising for a lot of different brands. So I'm kind of grateful that I get so much insight into just a ton of different verticals. And the biggest thing I keep seeing again and again, particularly either with folks trying to start or folks that have had good traction and are hitting to a threshold where they just can't punch through, is normally like this distraction, and kind of goes back to what we were talking earlier, of basically trying to serve too many different people, too many different masters, versus just doubling down and obsessing over one person, which is everything we did with EVA, was just figuring out exactly who the customer was and presenting everything just to that one individual, which everyone, kind of outside of the space would tell you is totally the wrong thing to do. Like, it's too narrow, too much of a solid focus. Like, the market's not big enough. It's just never been the case. Like, the more specific we have gotten, the bigger we have grown.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think people have the temptation to diversify or to try to expand or to be everything to everyone?
Succinctly, I'm not entirely sure. I mean, it's a lot, I think, of folks just thinking that an audience or a market cannot be big enough. And again, I think it depends so much on like what you want out of it. I mean, for EBA, the whole thing with this was like this actually started. This whole business and brand started. I was doing a bunch of consulting work, kind of going through a lot of the theory, and a lot of folks were saying like, "I get the theoretical, like I just want to see it played out," which is where EBA even began. Again, it was supposed to be like 3 to 6 month experiment. So it was like this white label product. Like, okay, let's figure out who the market is. We're going to white label product. This is nothing fancy. There's nothing crazy. Yeah, it's changed a lot, but it was just go and find the right market and just run the marketing side of it, run the customer obsession side of it, and prove that this method works. And yeah, I mean, 3.5 years later, like the brand is still healthy, still growing, still going. But like, yeah, all of this just started with just trying to prove, like, just talk to one persona, one small avatar.
So you already mentioned you have insights into 2,000 plus brands. You're doing a bunch of consulting. How do these brands stay alive? You know, the quote 90% fail within 3 years. What is that 10% in your opinion?
I mean, I wish I could say like the ones I've worked on over the years have all succeeded. They haven't. The ones that have, typically, I mean, again, it's so easy to say, like, they are lean, they are nimble, they don't get bogged down in, again, this is easy to say, they don't get bogged down like in brand and trying to figure that bit out and try to polish everything. They are very willing to just move fast, make mistakes, and break things. And if it goes wrong, put their hands up and like both internally and externally with their audience, say like, we screwed up, walk it back, and figure it out. The ones that have failed have either stayed the path way too long and figured that they were smarter than the market or smarter than Facebook or whatever the case might be. Like, that's typically where I've seen them go wrong.
Sunk cost fallacy.
Sunk cost fallacy.
Well, I was just going to say the cost centers of the business, like either lifestyle bloat or their COGS, like their gross margin is just too high and they're not doing everything even to just get a percentage point lower, negotiating terms with manufacturers, even shipping costs, like all these different things that can be, and then you add in advertising costs and a lot of mistakes there. Because what I heard from you just now is just being quick to pivot and not falling into the sunk cost fallacy of like, well, we've already invested this much, we have to keep going. And their ego gets too involved in whatever they're doing, or we need to be X, Y, and Z brand, and it needs to have this look and feel. And so they waste hundreds of thousands of dollars on branding when they don't have proof of concept from a customer. Because we're doing all this forecasting, we have a lot of insights into, and even before in the sales cycle, we can actually see like what their blended gross margin is. And it's just tough even from that perspective, because then you start running the math on, okay, well, this is what your CAC needs to be break even, and you're not an LTV brand. And this is what you're going to be contribution margin, maybe 5%. And then your fixed expenses are probably equal to that. And like, well, what's left here is there's no profit in the business. So I'd be curious to even hear your thoughts on some of those analysis that you're doing with some of the clients or brands that you're consulting with.
Yeah, I mean, at all levels, I will say like the most worrying thing I have dealt with most of the businesses is they do not know their financials. Like, it stuns me time and time again how many people do not know what their actual gross margin is, and not what like their cost price is from the factory, but like, yeah, take out all these fixed expenses. What does fulfillment and shipping and everything else cost? What is your actual gross profit at the end of that? It baffles me how many people do not actually know or understand that number, and subsequently then can't actually run any kind of forecast to know, if they're going to spend $20 to acquire a customer, what does that look like at 40? What does that look like at 60? Like, when do they run out of cash? Do they run out of cash? Are they fine? Are there months where they just need to temper things? I'm having a lot more of these conversations since Facebook has, sort of quote unquote become harder. At last, I think it's forcing people to have these conversations and actually start looking at data properly, and numbers properly.
Yeah,
it's worrying.
Why do you think founders are not financially literate? Because I agree with you. I don't have many conversations where it's probably 20% of the time, if that, where I get on the phone with people and they know their stuff.
I think there's a few reasons. I mean, I think for one, it's been too easy for the last 10 years. Like, you didn't really need to know it. too much. Yeah, if you could acquire a customer at a certain rate, let's say it was like sub $20, like you knew you were hunky dory, you were just printing money. It wasn't an issue. I think that has forced people's hand. Again, I think ego comes into it so much. And again, a lot of the brands I've worked with, particularly ones that have failed, have taken their eye off the ball. They've gotten to a certain level, they've outsourced everything, they've found accountants and kind of just put it in their hands. And again, a lot of folks that just don't understand the space at all. They're outsourcing to.
Well, let's talk about what you're building. Referencing another tweet, you just said basically you're deciding to build another D2C brand in public this time. I won't steal your thunder. So why don't you give the audience a little bit of a high level of what you're doing?
Yeah, well, I got to eat my words from earlier about not doing too much at once. I mean, EBA for the most part is fairly well automated and outsourced at this point. And what we're building, this is coming on like 9 months since sort of the first idea and concept of this got put in my head, which was at an event last year where I was talking about, what I'd done with previous brands, the consulting, stuff like that. And the question was kind of raised, like, do you think you could do it again now? Like, it was a lot easier back then. Like, do you think you could do it again now? And that kind of sat in my head for a little while. And then the more conversations I was having, I was like, the last time I did it behind a paywall, I really want to do that again. Like, it kind of feels shady, keeping everything back. I don't really like it. Yeah. And then couple it with the fact of there is just so much noise and nonsense that's put out on Twitter and LinkedIn and everywhere else that, frankly, is just wrong or just bad advice, particularly now. And I started talking to the guys at Audit, Taylor in particular, about this. And this kind of morphed into like, would they be interested in just kind of advising on the side, kind of helping me put this thing together? Again, with the same sort of concept of what we did with EBA of, to begin with, like finding product off the shelf, like let's just, again, go see, can we white label something, run the same playbook in 2024? Does it work? And that morphed into a conversation of them kind of coming on board more and more. This is Audit, which opened up conversations with a group called Petra, who own factories all around the world, one of which is the one we're going to be using. So, I mean, depending on when this comes out, I'm sure we can talk about this, it's fine. So we're launching House of Neon, which is a custom LED sign factory. So completely vertically integrated with the factory in China. We can do production within 24 to 48 hours, which is kind of unheard of in the space. Everyone else is like 5 to 12 weeks, typically.
To create this custom LED sign. 2
days in production. We can then ship within 4 days globally, pretty much to everywhere, which is ridiculous. And again, a lot of this is just taking advantage of what, I don't entirely love it. It's taking advantage of what like Temu and Shein have done and just the networks that they have opened up and the shipping costs that have been lowered by actually shipping directly from the factory. We will then be stocking stuff locally as well. So working with 3PLs in the US and UK to actually have sort of next day delivery on some sort of standard designs. But yeah, everything else will be custom made, real fast turnaround.
So you can put like a kinship custom neon sign right above my head.
Definitely do that.
And that'll be in this space within a week?
Oh yeah.
Let's go. So have you been posting like this Twitter this was back in it was last month. So have you been public with the name of the brand since on Twitter as of right now?
No, not yet.
But maybe by the time this comes out.
By the time we come out, this should be out or should be announced. Biggest thing's been holding us back. Like we've got websites pretty much all designed, ready to go. We've got a group, if I can name Presidio, that's helping us build that whole thing out. Stupidly generous for what they're doing. But a lot of it has just been trying to get nuts and bolts of everything figured out. Everything's sort of dialed in, factory ready to go, brand ready to go. In some ways, this is very different to me bootstrapping the past. There's 6 of us working on this one.
Very different AOV, I'm sure.
A very different AOV.
I think I put in your thread, it said $400 plus AOV.
Exactly, yeah.
So, but margins, are you going to be opening up the books? Like how building in public are you building?
I mean, I want to be fairly. The other guys are pretty comfortable. Like I'm just trying to like finalize the details of exactly what I can and can't share. But I think we're going to be fairly open book. Certainly with like ads, emails, like everything we're running will be completely open book.
And good margins, I'm sure.
And good margins. Yeah.
Good margins. Not much. So I'm just giving you my initial feedback on that brand. Not much of an LTV play.
Not much an LTV play.
This is going to be a one, I Cody buy this one time for my office.
By and large, yeah. I mean, it's kind of the funny thing. Like the more people we talk to about this, we're very much like focused, and it still is the focus of primarily direct to consumer. What we're noticing more and more with conversations we're having is like there is this huge B2B play with this business too, of events and conferences that are already like we're having conversations with for much, much bigger orders, which has been refreshing.
Very interesting. Very interesting. So as we're recording this in middle of June, what is the current phase of building? And then what is like the next maybe 2 to 3 months? What does this look like in terms of production and go live? And what's the timeline here?
All being well, the site should be, and again, the customizer has been like the hardest part of trying to figure this out so that someone can go on, design the whole thing themselves, and then it just goes straight to the factory. Like there's no human intervention or anything in between. Then trying to figure out, so we're going to put basically a customer service rep in the warehouse for anything that does come up. Sorry, not the warehouse, like in the factory. So if there are any production issues, that's literally someone on the ground in China can just walk over and figure them out and kind of run customer service from there. We're hiring a content girl in China to do the same thing, like just get a ton of content from the factory so that we can start putting ad creatives together from the get-go. We are also building up a fairly small list to begin with, but influencers to get signs to. And typically, again, like podcast space, creator space. But yeah, all being well, go live is probably like 2 to 4 weeks away.
Yours truly.
Yeah.
I mean, I should be on your seating list for sure. I mean, look at this empty black wall above me. So obviously the title of the show, Bottom Line, where we're tying everything back into the bottom line of the business. But also we have a question is that we're asking is, what is your bottom line advice? You can answer that any way that you want, how you interpret that.
I mean, again, I don't know how much longer we kind of got to run, but I mean, just quickly, like the whole kind of ethos of what we're trying to do with House of Neon is like looking at competitors and where are they really, really under delivering. And a lot of the time, as silly as it sounds, you buy an LED sign. So many of these companies don't ship it with the chain to hang it up with. They don't ship it with a like screw kit. So there's no way to actually install this thing when you arrive. It's all like these little touch points that are just infuriating as a consumer. And as easy as it would be to say, like, let's just keep the margin. It's like, okay, if we just eat a bit more of the margin, like 1 or 2 points, ever so slightly, over deliver, give people dimmers as standard, give them screw kits as standard. Like we know for a fact that, I know with a high degree of confidence and from past businesses, like when we do the same thing, if we over deliver in that aspect, put way more value in, like our word of mouth increases, our cost to acquire a customer decreases rapidly. I mean, that's where like influencer seeding for EBA came in so dramatically. It was like, and you said it at the time, it was like, just get more of these alarms in people's hands. Like that will change your business. And you know how firsthand how long you took to convince me that this was a sensible strategy. I mean, you pretty much beat me over the head and told me you never talk to me again unless I actually signed up. But honestly, it was the best thing we ever did. Truly.
That is a great way to end the episode, Tom. I will say what you're landing on is that fighting over a couple of percentage points here on a less important metric when it's going to deliver a much better user experience, customer experience, is going to lead to so much more cash in the business, whether it's on a cost savings basis or on an actual revenue generating basis. So I love it, man. Tom, where do people find you?
Typically, Twitter is at Simply Tom. And some people call me Simple Tom. So.
I mean, if you could put Shopify Tom, that's what you would put, because in your bio it says, I am the Shopify guy, GDC guy.
Never even tried to grab that, and now I should before this goes anywhere.
Yeah, you should. You should be looking that up. But Tom, thanks for joining, man.
Dude, it's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.